When we see the rise of the BJP, again, a supremacist ideology, Hindu supremacist in this case, we find that it draws a great deal of inspiration from Zionism.
Why do you think that the criticism of Hindutva is often, treated differently from criticism of Zionism in Western political discourse?
Same strategy being applied in India. Hate unites as much as it divides.
Pakistan's official narrative historically emphasized its Islamic heritage in connection to Islamic civilizations.
Oh, I like Pakistani food, then they'll be like, no, sir, it is Indian food, sir. I mean, come on. They're the biggest time wasters in the world.
Do Pakistan's liberals face a similar dilemma where fear and expediency override democratic principles?
Do we have liberals in Pakistan? Here you have people being like, well, I like to have a glass of scotch when I come home. That makes me a liberal. Sure, you're a lifestyle liberal. That doesn't necessarily translate into political liberalism.
Hello and welcome to another episode. Today I'm joined by Zarrar Khuhro. He's one of the Pakistan's most respected journalists, columnists, and public intellectuals. As a former editor and a sharp observer of politics, history, media, and international affairs, he is known for bringing depth, nuance, and historical context to some of the most complex issues that shape Pakistan and the wider world. It is an absolute pleasure to have him with us today. Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Walaikum salam ji, kaise hain?
I'm good. Thank you so much for joining. So today we will largely discuss Hindutva, Zionism, the crisis of Western liberalism in Pakistan's identity. So in this regard, my first question to you is that you have often spoken about the historical alliance between India and Israel and the ideological parallels between Hindutva and Zionism. You have always been obviously a vocal critic of both. Many people assume that the strong support for Israel among Hindutva supporters is simply a reaction to contemporary geopolitics or Islamism. But you argue that the relationship runs much deeper. First of all, tell our audiences that what are the historical, ideological, or political links that have brought these two movements so close together?
I mean, look, so if anybody really is interested in that, I will recommend, as I often have in the past, that one reads Azad Isa's book. It's called Hostile Homelands, the alliance between Hindutva and Zionism. I mean, that contains the entire story far better than I can encapsulate it in a few minutes. Look, India's historic stance on Israel and Palestine was, of course, different in the outset. This is when India was positioning itself as sort of the leader of the colonized world, the NAM and so on and so forth, the non-aligned movement. As geopolitical realities changed, this changed as well. I think that even if you look at it, even if you look at, for example, US and Israel relations, there's a quantitative and qualitative difference pre the 1967 war and post the 1967 war. It's often said that victory settles a great deal of things in men's minds. So when Israel emerged as a power capable of defeating several Arab armies simultaneously, a lot of people sat up and paid no attention to it. Now, at that point, you could say that this is strategic interest, this is geopolitical interest, and of course, because India did not want to lose the goodwill of the Arab world, which at that point was, of course, deeply opposed to Israel, almost unanimously, then this sort of relationship had to be kept a little bit under covers, right? But then there was a lot of effort from Israel. There was a lot of effort from India, Israeli expertise, Israeli tech, Israeli weapons were sought, not just by India, but by many countries around the world. When we see the rise of the BJP, and you have to understand, I'm really, really condensing things here, okay? When we see the rise of the BJP, again, a supremacist ideology, Hindu supremacist in this case, we find that it draws a great deal of inspiration from Zionism, which is, of course, fundamentally a Jewish supremacist ideology. Then we find that tactics are exchanged and tactics are borrowed. For example, collective punishment on the Palestinians, the use of bulldozers to demolish entire houses, entire neighborhoods. We see that same strategy being applied in India, across India. We see it in Kashmir. We see it in many different things. It is not a coincidence that Yogi Adityanath, the chief minister of UP, I believe, is known as Bulldozer Baba. That's become a symbol of it. Then, of course, the architecture of repression, the architecture of surveillance, that is something that India has very much taken from the Israelis. And then, of course, you have to understand that hate unites as much as it divides. So when you have a party in power, an ideology in power in India, which is basically an RSS ideology, it's a Sanghi ideology, it's a VHP ideology, and that ideology is built on othering, right? And othering is a brilliantly successful tactic historically, right? You take a population and you tell that population, okay, hey, the cause of all your problems, it's not the government, it's not you yourself, it's these other guys. You create a target, you create a scapegoat, and that is exactly what Israel has done, and that is exactly what Modi's India is doing as well. So the affinity is a natural one. I would be surprised if it wasn't taking place. However, one does also see that increasingly it comes at the expense of what a rational actor would define as India's own national interests. I mean, Modi went to Israel a day before the war on Iran was launched, and he did his, rather cringy motherland, fatherland, sar wala, jumla, which I mean, it's God, it's repulsive to see, frankly speaking. And this is despite the fact that Iran has actually, in many ways, been closer to India than it has to Pakistan, despite having more cultural and religious affinity with Pakistan. I mean, these things don't really matter, I don't think, in the world of geopolitics, but some people think they do. I think that they're mistaken. But so we saw that, India didn't even bother to condemn the attack on Iran. And although it is India which is also very badly squeezed by the blockage of Hormuz, I mean, this is the same India that invested deeply in Chabahar, right? This is also the same India which positioned Kulbhushan Yadav in Iran, and so on and so forth. I mean, I could go on with all the details. We find that India didn't even bother to condemn the attacks. In fact, I think that India had been sold the same myth, the same lie, as it seems that Netanyahu sold the Trump administration, which is like, hey, bro, don't worry about it, man. We'll bomb them for a week, we'll kill their leadership, and there'll be regime change, and then there will be rivers of milk and honey, and we'll all be really happy. Obviously, that hasn't happened. But we also find at the same time India being sort of very bitter and what's the word, sadu, about Pakistan's efforts to bring the war to a close, which is frankly retarded, because it is India that suffers from this war as much as any other country suffers. So what we have, I think, in India is a classic example of what happens when you have a foreign policy based on a very narrow ideological worldview. Now, you can use that worldview domestically to fool people. People are very easily fooled, we just went into that. But when it becomes the cornerstone of foreign policy, then I think that you need to think again, because we can clearly see that India's foreign policy is suborned to its domestic policy. And we have also seen the results of that. I mean, they lost Bangladesh. You have a small island chain, the Maldives, which just thumbs its nose at India. There's tensions with Nepal. I'm not even going to mention Pakistan because, that history is right in front of you. So you have a would-be regional hegemon that nobody in the region likes, simply because, they tend to be so crude about things. So I don't know if that answers your question, but there we are.
Yeah, very fair. I just want to ask that why do you think that the criticism of Hindutva is often, treated differently from criticism of Zionism in Western political discourse? Because Zionism, or the criticism of Zionism, often invites accusations of extremism and anti-Semitism, while Hindutva is the criticism of Hindutva is increasingly accepted in the liberal circles. Why is that so?
I mean, okay, so the first part of your question, the answer is very, very obvious. We'll come to it. But I'm curious, what do you mean by increasingly acceptable criticism of Hindutva in Western discourse? Because I don't see very much of it.
I'm referring to the intellectuals whom we hear on the talk shows in debates, mainly in Europe and America. They usually, they accept the criticism, okay, Hindutva is an extremist, it's extremist ideology. The people are, they are exceeding their limits, but they do not feel the same about Zionism. When it comes to Zionism, they obviously are very acceptable of the fact that whatever they are holding up to is their right.
Obviously, we're proceeding from a generalization, but I mean, again, the devil is in the details, right? So, look, there is no consequence really for to criticizing Hindutva in the West. There are no consequences. You're not going to be accused of anti-Hinduism. You're not going to be suddenly find yourself without a job. You're not going to have, massive smear campaigns against you. You're not going to have, say, your credit cards cancelled, like happened with Francesca Albanese and so on and so forth. So it's a very low cost thing to do, and you can easily do it. When it comes to criticism of Zionism, because the Zionist state of Israel and its many, many, many allies in the media, in Western political systems, in the financial system, so on and so forth, have very successfully for decades, that's changing now, we'll come to that, have very successfully for decades whitewashed Zionism, not just whitewashed Zionism, but increasingly you find that they are connected anti-Zionism to criticism of Israel and criticism of Israel to criticism of Judaism, hence anti-Semitism. So in the West, if you were to criticize Zionism, you are very much open to accusations of anti-Semitism, and those accusations can be very costly. We have seen people lose their jobs. We have seen people being smeared. We have seen people lose their entire careers. So the costs are very high, but what is significant is that people are doing it anyway. I mean, you have people like Yanis Varoufakis. I could list dozens and dozens of people, and perhaps you won't see them on CNN. You certainly won't see them on Fox, right? Because again, when we talk about discourse, we have to be a little bit clear, okay, what are we talking about? Are we talking about mainstream media discourse? Are we talking about social media discourse, right? So discourse is a very broad term. I think that it is very significant that you find pushback now, because for many, many decades, right, there was absolutely nothing of the sort. If we were to criticize Judaism, Israel, it means, oh my God, you hate Jews, you want to kill all Jews. They're still trying the same arguments, but those arguments just aren't working. I'll give you one small example. Just take a look at the replies beneath any Netanyahu tweet. And look what happens. Whenever he tweets something, people post a picture of a cockroach and they're like, bro, the cockroach is going to get more likes than you. And the cockroach does. So that tells you something, that despite there being a huge cost, still a huge cost to speaking out against Israel and the clear evils and horrors that Zionism has perpetrated and continues to perpetrate, people are doing it regardless. So while there may be sister ideologies, we do have to understand that, जैसे कहते हैं ना, पांचों उंगलियां बराबर नहीं होती. Also, how does Hindutva really affect the West? It doesn't. It doesn't. Yeah. Hindutva is a problem for India. Hindutva is a problem for India's neighbors, certainly. But it's not really a problem for the broader West. Even when, for example, the Modi government carries out assassination campaigns in America and in Canada, that does not become related to Hindutva, and that comes in under criticism. So there's no skin in the game there. No? There's no costs for it, and there's really no need for it either. So that debate, I think, takes place in very close, the anti-Hindutva debate takes place in very, very closed and limited circles. I don't really see how that would ever spill out into the mainstream, per se.
Since October 2023, many people who once strongly identified with Western liberal values have become deeply disillusioned by what they see as selective applications of human rights and international law and freedom of expression. You have often come across as a liberal and not necessarily as a Westernist. After witnessing the responses to Gaza, do you feel your own worldview has hardened against the West?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There's no two ways about it. Look, man, it's always been a lie. Let's be clear about this, okay? Now, again, when we say liberal values, I am going to ask you to define those, right?
Yeah, liberal values. It's a broad term, I know, but Western liberal values are, for example, the equality before law, the democracy, universal human rights, freedom of expression, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of property, owning the property, self-determination, democratic accountability. But I was reading an article on this. They also, categorized this into three further categories, which were that classic liberalism, then modern liberal internationalism, and then the actual foreign policies of the Western states.
Okay, I think that look. I think that any ideology, okay, be it a liberal ideology, be it whatever you want to call it, however we're defining liberal, because most of the time people are arguing very different definitions. You'll say liberal, it means something else to me. It might mean something else to you, and it might mean a completely different things to the people listening here. So fine, let's proceed with that, with the definition that you've given right now of respect for human rights. Look, that's always been a lie. I mean, let's not, like, pussyfoot about it. Let's not dance about it, right? Because at the end of the day, it is national interest and, frankly speaking, imperial hangover that most of the West is still suffering from, right? I mean, this is the same liberal France that committed horrific atrocities in Algeria. I mean, the list goes on, right? Wasn't it
Yeah.
liberal America bombing the life out of Vietnam, poisoning the soil for years? What about Iraq? What about Fallujah? So I never believed that to begin with. And I think that if anyone did, then they're just remarkably stupid and haven't bothered to read any history at all. I mean, we do not judge people by the labels they attach to themselves. We judge by their actions. Words are wind, no? They mean nothing. I mean, I could call myself Monica Bellucci, but that doesn't make me Monica Bellucci, right? I mean, for example, North Korea calls itself the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Is it? Is it democratic? Is it a republic? No. So no, look, it's clear that the West believes all of these things, believes in human rights, but only for themselves, believes in freedom, but only for themselves. The moment you start opposing their policies, call them imperial policies, call them neo-imperial policies, call them what you want, then they will try and crush you like a bug. And that will also be accompanied by a very, very strong media campaign against you. So this is just the way the world works. And frankly, this is the way the world has always worked. No empire, when it's conquering a smaller country, says anything like, hey, we're coming in, we're taking your resources. They will always say that, oh, we are here to civilize you. We are here to give you a better standard of living. We are here to free you, right? This is always how it works. I mean, how many times have you heard from the West, oh, we are invading this country because women are oppressed over there? Like, oh, yeah, really? You think that that's why the Pentagon goes to war? So, I mean, no one believes that. I think if anybody still believes it right now, then it's probably better that they donate their brain to science, just to see, how could anyone be this goddamn dumb? Yeah.
Okay.
So, no, I think that the facade, let's put it that way, the facade of Western liberalism lies buried in the rubble of Gaza, along with the tens of thousands of Palestinians who are still buried there. Yeah, that's what I'd say.
So this pretty much answers my question in ambiguities. Anyway, there is an interesting debate in Pakistan about civilizational identity. I'm coming to Pakistan. On one hand, Pakistan's official narrative historically emphasized its Islamic heritage in connection to Islamic civilizations. On the other hand, figures such as Chaudhry Rehmat Ali in his pamphlet Now or Never, I guess it was in 1933, and then Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, and then more lately Etazaz Ehsan, they argued that the Indus Valley civilization is it forms a distinct historical foundation of Pakistan. Today, social media is flooded with nationalist disputes in which AI-generated content and pictures are also there by India and Pakistan, but mainly by India. So how do you view this debate?
Well, it's in our borders, right? Do the pyramids belong to Egypt? Does Stonehenge belong to England? I would argue, yeah. If it's in your borders, and this is the part of the world that historically formed the nucleus of the Indus Valley civilization, why shouldn't we own it? I will also just say that I find these debates to be an incredible waste of time. Okay, because the fact of the matter is that all of this is part of our heritage. All right. I will also correct you on one small point. The emphasis on Islamic heritage, or perhaps the overemphasis of Islamic heritage, that picks up largely in the Zia years. Okay. Again, there's nothing wrong with that, right? That is also part of our history. There is no denying that. It is very much informs us as to who we are today right in the now. But I also have with my in my little bookshelf over here, I have like little tourist guides to Pakistan, which were published in the 50s and the 60s and so on and so forth. The Indus Valley civilization is all over them. Okay, as a child, I mean, we used to get figurines of the priest king and the dancing girl of Mohenjo-daro. I have those little clay tablets, replicas of those clay tablets right here and there. So why does it have to be an either or? This is not a multiple choice exam. All of
Yeah.
the above is my answer. Okay.
Okay.
No, I mean, yeah, because look, why do we waste time on non-issues is my problem. Oh, who does the Indus Valley belong to? Who really cares? Okay, the Indus Valley civilization is named after the Indus. The Indus flows in Pakistan. I mean, who
Mm.
else is going to claim it? The Iraqis? No, of course not, yeah. It's like going to Iraq and being like, well, does Babylon actually belong to you? Of course, it does and it doesn't. Things have changed. Countless peoples and civilizations and empires have come and gone since then. I think that absolutely it's a part of our heritage, just like Taxila is a part of our heritage, just like Muhammad bin Qasim and even Raja Dahir are part of our heritage. Raja Porus is part of our heritage. All of these things are part of our heritage. And none of them define us, or perhaps all of them define us. As far as the Indians go, they just can't bother with anything. No? I mean, if somebody even tweets like, oh, I like Pakistani food, then they'll be like, no, sir, it is Indian food, sir. I mean, come on. They're the biggest time wasters in the world. So, I mean, any debate that they're involved in is a debate that I don't even want to be near. So yes, all of the above. It's all part of our heritage. We should be proud of all of it, and we should celebrate all of it. Why not? I mean, why does it have
Okay.
to be a choice, right?
Yeah,
And also
very,
I
very.
find these, frankly speaking, I find these nationalist debates like incredibly tiresome. I
Okay, so
think,
huh,
yeah, gee.
people basically on social media are wasting their times. I
People
get
on
it.
social media are always wasting time. What's new about this? Right? I mean, and nowadays, you don't even know who's actually wasting time and who's just doing it to get a couple of dollars from that psychopath Elon Musk. Now it's all engagement farming and rage bait. I mean,
Yes.
I think that if someone starts taking these seriously, then that's a problem. That's a problem. But dekho,
Yeah.
dargozar karo, ignore it. Who cares? I
Okay.
care very little about most things now, honestly.
Well,
Maybe 10 years ago I
yeah.
would have been like, "Oh my God, what does this mean?" And I'm like, now why am I getting triggered over lover boy 451 on Twitter? I mean, for God's sakes, then the problem is with me now. It's not with that guy. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So going back to that liberal debate, my one question is that in countries like Egypt, Turkey, and Algeria, sections of liberal and secular elites have at times aligned themselves with military or authoritarian actors because they feared Islamist or populist movements more than the authoritarianism itself. Do you do Pakistan's liberals face a similar dilemma where fear and expediency override democratic principles?
Do we have liberals in Pakistan? I mean,
Do
again, you see, this comes down to a question of definition. Now, look, okay, so here's my problem with these debates, right? Is that we take terminology that does not belong to us. We copy paste it
Okay.
onto ourselves. For me, it's like, for
Yeah,
example,
right.
you talk about liberals, right? Where does the
Hmm.
concept of political liberalism starts from? It starts with the Enlightenment. Why in Europe? Okay.
Yeah.
Now, what did they argue?
Renaissance.
They argued individual rights, so on and so forth, because they were trying to reduce the rights of the monarchs and the nobility. Right?
Hmm.
Have we passed through a similar process to arrive at that conclusion? No, we have not.
No.
Has Turkey? No, it has not. So my point is, in California, in the US, you have these beautiful trees, the California redwoods. Have you seen them? They're giant. Okay.
Hmm.
If I were to take that and plant it in Thar, will it survive? No, because the environment is not suited for it. So why do we borrow phrases that are frankly decrepit now, outdated, and impose them where they do not apply? How can we at all try and generalize to that extent? I mean, when we say Turkish liberals, then are we ignoring the historical process that led to that school of thought in Turkey? You understand? Now, yahan par Pakistan mein we often make a mistake. There are I don't even know if there are any ideological liberals, or if liberalism deserves to be called an ideology. I don't think it does. Right? Here you have people being like, well, I like to have a glass of scotch when I come home. That makes me a liberal. Sure, you're a lifestyle liberal. That doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily translate into political liberalism, does it? I mean, it could, but
Yeah.
it doesn't necessarily have to. The Turkish
Yes.
situation is specific to Turkey. The Algerian situation is specific to Algeria. The Pakistani situation is very much specific to Pakistan. So when we say, for example, as you're asking right now, have liberals in Pakistan supported military intervention? Then I'll have to ask you specifically who you're talking about.
You have often come across as a liberal.
But
No,
I don't call myself that. So I'm not responsible for what people may think of me, right?
we assume that you are by reading your works.
I'm confused. I don't really subscribe to an ideology. Okay, if I were to subscribe to any ideology, and I change my views a lot. I'm a bit of an ideological lota. Okay, I'll be
Okay.
honest with you. Okay? For me, ideology is not a fixed menu. For me, ideology is a buffet. आज मेरा मूड हो रहा है कि मैं मच्छी खाऊं, मैं मच्छी खा लूंगा. Right? So call that what you will, call it a U-turn, call it what you want. That's where I'm at. Because ultimately, if your views don't evolve with changing circumstances, then that's not ideology, that's dogma, that's not belief. Do you understand? That is, in 1984, I read a book and my entire worldview is still that book. I think that's not a very wise way to approach the world, especially when we are looking at a time when the time that we're living in, right? Is a time of great transition and great change. The old is dead and the new is being born in front of our eyes. That's going to give rise to new ideologies, new systems of belief, right? So I believe that there are certain ideologies that apply in a certain historical period in a certain part of the world. I'm going to give you a very small example of this. Communism, right?
Hmm.
Was Soviet, okay, so Marx and Engels, arguably they come up with this ideological, practical framework, right? Was Soviet communism the same as Chinese communism? No.
No.
Was that the same as Yugoslavian communism? No. Romanian, Albanian? No. Because
Hmm.
ultimately, it adjusts to the soil in which it is transplanted. Look at China now. It is run by the Communist Party of China, but I don't think that Karl Marx would recognize it, right? So all ideologies have to adjust, they have to alter, or they die, right? Its evolution applies as much to living species as it does to ideological frameworks. You adapt or you die. That's why so many ideologies now simply just don't, cut the cheese. Like they just no longer apply because they are the products of a dead age. And this is the age we're living in. So if I were to sum up my ideology at this point in time, it is something like what Deng Xiaoping said, the guy who really just reformed China, put China on the path that it is right now. I believe Xi Jinping's hero. And he said that it doesn't matter to me whether the cat is black or the cat is white. The only thing that matters to me is if the cat can catch mice. So I am a big fan of what works, right? And what I have seen in this world, right, is that might is right. It is
Hmm.
power that is the central determinant of anything. No amount of moral upper. What is moral upper ground? Moral upper ground doesn't mean anything. The Palestinians have the moral upper ground. Has that stopped them from being genocided? No. Power. Now, here's where it gets interesting: is how do you define power? So, one for me, the top definition, of course, is hard military might, right?
Hmm.
As
Hmm.
we displayed in the conflict with India in 2025, right? It doesn't matter whether we were right or whether we were wrong. See, that doesn't mean anything. Yeah, acha, sahi hai. What are you going to get? A certificate for that? No, that doesn't matter. What matters is how well you can perform in the field of battle. Then, of course, underpinning that is economic power. You can't live without that either, right? You also need flexibility in your foreign policy approaches. We have shown that, right? If you look at our interactions lately with the Middle East, with the Trump administration, with China, I mean, look at it. We are in kind of a position where we are okay with just about everybody except India. That's a good place to be in. Then, of course, the foundation of even all of that is then national cohesion. Now, here one can go into different little side arguments, what should be the best approach to national cohesion? In my view, and this would probably be a somewhat liberal view, I think that people should be given room to breathe. I think that people should be given the opportunity in a controlled way to let off steam. But that does not mean that, for example, the state gives up its monopoly on violence. I believe that the state should absolutely retain its monopoly on violence and should use that monopoly on violence, but in a very controlled way. Because when you do it too much, there's always a terrible backlash. So I believe in giving, minorities their rights. I believe in a great degree of devolution to provinces so that they can take care of the people, not just because it's a good thing to do, but because strategically it makes sense. We are racked with insurgencies, right? There's one in Balochistan. There's a terrorist movements up in KP and the TTP striking in, backed by Afghanistan, right? So by all means, give the people a stake, give them a reason to turn against these groups, but at the same time, crush these groups with extreme violence. So not just stick, but carrot as well. Now, a lot of people will agree with me in the first half and then be like, nay, but violence is not a solution. Well, if you actually read history, you will find that violence is very much a solution. When people say war doesn't solve anything, really? How do you think empires are formed? Right? War and violence are intrinsic. You can't live without them. Now, a lot of people will be like, oh my God, but that's terrible. War shouldn't exist. Yes, great. And I should have a Lamborghini and my toilet should be made out of solid gold, but it's not, right? We live in the here and now, not in the oasis of the imagination. This is the desert of the real. And when we talk about Pakistan and we talk about, there needs to be complete freedom of expression, freedom of speech, complete democracy, gee, saw bismillah. But look at your neighborhood for a moment, right? Look at your neighborhood. When you look north, Raisa, Bibi, what do you see? You see Afghanistan? What is the situation there? You look at the West, you see Iran, largely a theocracy, definitely a police state, right? You look at the South and the East, what do you have? You have India, which is in the grip of an incredible national psychosis, right? This is our neighborhood. What do we expect? Switzerland? No, we're not going to be Switzerland. Even Switzerland isn't Switzerland. So I think that forget about ideology. Look at what happens on the ground. That's what is important. Otherwise, these ivory tower debates, we can have them. We can have them for hours. I enjoy them. But we should understand that they make no difference on the ground at all.
Okay. Can you please, in a few words, encapsulate your definition of being a liberal?
I don't define it. I think that it is a decrepit and dead ideology. I view things more like left, center, and right. I think that liberalism, it was an ill-defined ideology specific to a certain time in Europe. I don't think it means anything anymore. I don't think it means anything. Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough.
You can have a liberal approach to certain things, but it's so ill-defined that I would prefer not to even define it. And also, yahan par kya hota hai na, ye khuni liberal fascist, you stop them for a moment and be like, iska matlab kya hai? No one can explain it to you. So half the time, we're not arguing with each other. We're not talking to each other. I'm arguing with this straw man of you that I've made inside my head. Now, there's nothing you can do about that. No?
Okay. I still want to ask you a question. I know I'm being stubborn or,
No problem. Go for it.
Okay. So, whoever those Pakistanis are who call themselves liberal, critics argue that sections of Pakistan's liberal intelligentsia were far more aggressive in their criticism of establishment influence before 2022 than they are today. Do you think is this criticism fair, or does it ignore the complexities of Pakistan's political landscape?
I think it's a fair criticism in many terms. Sure. Yeah. But again, the devil lies in the details. I remember, again, now we're not even talking about people who call themselves liberals. We are talking about people whom other people call liberals, right? So you see what I'm saying here, right? So, okay, let's say, fine, showbiz, right? So many showbiz people were big fans of Musharraf, right? When Musharraf came to power in a military coup, a lot of these people supported them. At the same time, then they also supported Imran Khan. But when Imran Khan was removed, then they were like, this is bad. So, I mean, pick a lane, pick a lane and stick to it. Yeah, to just say, ke, hey, man, I like the guy, so I support him. I don't like the guy, so I don't support him. Ideology, bhaad mein jaye.
Hmm.
Then just say that. I think that look, a lot has also changed. I mean, let's again, I will come back to this, right? Let's take a look at what's happening around us. You know, I think a lot of people make a trade-off. Okay, like fine, yeah, we've been crushed and suppressed and beaten so badly, ke jo hai so hai. Let's just see where it goes and make the most of it. And that's really, I mean, tell you the truth, there is no longer any cause that I really feel passionate about. So again, my question again is, is the catch catching mice? So far, it seems to be catching mice. The day it stops catching mice, then we'll come and revisit it.
So, one of the most striking developments of recent years has been the growing perception that the United States no longer functions primarily as a guardian of a rules-based order, and or it is a declining empire, but increasingly as a system driven. It is an increasingly a system driven by military, industrial interests, elite networks, and political demagogues like obviously the Trump is. Critics also argue that the endless wars enrich powerful countries, powerful actors, while ordinary people, they only get the
Yeah.
bloodshed and displacement. Do you think that this assessment is exaggerated, or are we witnessing a genuine crisis of Western democracy itself? Because I would mention two people here. For example, I was talking to Dr. Kamran Bukhari, and he said that US can never decline. It's not a declining power. And he had his arguments. And then
Right.
I talked to Ammar Ali Jan. He said that, that's totally a false narrative building. Obviously, US is a declining power and the future belongs to East Asia and the China. So what's your take on this?
Well, okay, so there you've asked a lot of questions. The first question was about the US. But that's what they've always been. I mean, look, without judgment, the
Hmm.
United States is a country founded on genocide, right?
Yeah.
Why do you think that so many people in the United States support Israel? It's because colonizers see themselves in Israel and the colonized see themselves in Palestine. That's how it works, right?
Hmm.
I mean, you look at what happened to the Native Americans. जिसको यहाँ पर हम Red Indians कहते हैं. It's a wrong term to use, but चले. Look at what happened to them. That was one of the, excuse me, most successful genocides in history. Look up some of the details, they'll give you sleepless nights, right?
Hmm.
So, founded on genocide, built on slave labor, right? Why are there so many black people in America? You think that they came there on visit visas? No, of course not. They were brought there as the transatlantic slave trade and
Great.
sustained by war. What runs America if not the military industrial complex? Politicians are bought and sold. Like how cricket teams wear logos on their vests, Pepsi, Coke, whatever.
Yes.
I think that I think that American politicians should wear those, bought by Exxon, bought by Halliburton, so on and so forth, to make things more honest. And the best part
Hmm.
is, in most of the world, this would be called bribery. In America, it's called campaign contribution. So basically, they've taken a crime and they've legalized it, right? As far as declining power in relative
Yeah.
decline, absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. I know Kamran, but I think to say that the US will never decline, I think that that's an insane statement for anyone to make. Because all empires decline, everything has a life cycle. That's like me saying, "Nay, I will never die." Of course I will. I mean, that's just like, I mean, I don't know a single empire in history that hasn't declined. If anybody does, please enlighten me. The US is very much in a process of relative decline. Look
Hmm.
at it this way, right? When the so-called war on terror was launched, right? When they went and they attacked Iraq and they went and they attacked Afghanistan, how many countries were in the US-led coalition? Almost 50. In the war on Iran, how many are in the American coalition? One. And that is the
Hmm.
genocidal state of Israel. Is that not a decline? When you look at in real terms, when you look at what the Chinese economy is doing, when you look at the way their military is expanding, and there's a massive gap, I admit that. So there is a relative decline. The US is not the whole and sole superpower that it was in the years after the collapse of the Soviet Union. The world has changed and it continues to change. And I think that anyone who's denying that is really in denial, right? And what was the last question? Sorry.
First of all, I want to make a point here that the proponents of American dominance, they argue that the world depends upon hard power, and hard power belongs to America and not China.
Sure.
Therefore, America cannot decline.
Yeah, it's not though, but you see again, look, if you're going to analyze, if they're going to analyze something through one factor alone, then your analysis is always going to be wrong. Okay, that's like if America is, oh my God, has so much hard power, why is Iran still on its feet? Right? I mean, come on. I mean, अगर ऐसी बात है तो फिर why haven't they been crushed yet? Right? Why does any America seek to contain China then if they're all so powerful? I mean, what the Roman Empire was not a military superpower. Of course, it was. So was the Byzantine Empire. But all things decline. So hard power is one component, perhaps the most important component, arguably, you could make that point, but it's not the only component. That is why when you say decline, I always use the term relative decline, as in relative to what they were, the graph is coming down. Having said that, none of us have a crystal ball to stare into the future. I am very wary of people who give incredibly confident predictions on the future because, hey, I don't even know what I'm having for dinner. How am I going to project 10 years in the future, right? So come on, let's be a little bit humble and let's be a little bit realistic about it. So I wouldn't make sweeping statements, but yes, I do think that the US is past its prime now. Empires have a life cycle. I think that it is nearing the end of its own. What will replace it is another thing. Now, this does not mean that, oh my God, the US will be finished and ye tabah ho jayenge, barbad ho jayenge, and so on and so forth. That's also crazy. That's a crazy thing to say or a crazy thing to believe. But I do absolutely believe, and this is like, I mean, it's in front of us, that they are not the power that they once were. And if all things remaining equal and if current trend lines remain in place, in another 20 years, that gap will become even more evident. Yeah.
Okay. So this pretty much answers my question. I'm moving on to the last question, which is that we have already talked about the dumb people using social media, but why does anti-Iran sentiment in Pakistan it surged so quickly on social media? I just want to ask you that is it rooted primarily in the sectarian divides, Gulf influenced narratives, Western influence, or a broader identity crisis in Pakistan's foreign policy outlook?
Do you mean like during this current conflict?
Yes, the current conflict. For example,
I've seen the exact opposite, actually. I
well,
have
for
seen.
example, I'll give you a small example. I read some tweets in which people said that this is not the war on Iran. This is basically a war to liberate Iranian women and to empower them. So we are
How
very
many
happy.
people said that? How many people said that? Come on.
Obviously,
Look, okay, again, okay. Look, I can find some absolute moron saying some absolutely moronic things and hold that up as an example, but that would be dishonest. What I have seen, okay, I've seen stupid people tweeting stupid things. Sure, I've seen people being like, "Ha, Shia kafir, and sabko maar do." But those are outlier opinions. The vast majority of Pakistanis that I have seen on social media have been more on Iran's side than on America and Israel side. Now, this is across sectarian divides I'm talking about, and this is not due to any deep-rooted love for Iran. It is to do with a deep-rooted disdain for the people, for the forces committing aggression on Iran. I mean, people have watched 3 years of a genocide. We have seen babies being decapitated in their mother's womb. We have seen little girls shot 400 times. Right? We have seen Israeli soldiers rape prisoners with our eyes. And when a force like that, an inarguably evil force like that, is aligned against our neighbor, who does anyone with good conscience stand with? Certainly not with Israel. Certainly not with America. So this is something that I have been in pains to explain to some of my colleagues in Washington, because they're like, oh, but Pakistan, Iran has never been good to Pakistan. Why is people over here so in support of Pakistan, America? Because of who they're up against. And because, to me, it is an absolute nightmare for Pakistan to have a Zionist puppet on its western border. So my support for Israel, for my relative support for Iran in this is not based so much on humanity as it is based on strategic interest. I think that it is in our strategic interest to do it. So I cannot really comment on what you're saying because I have not really seen people say that kind of thing in any significant way. Otherwise, you will always find one or two nuts saying crazy things. And anyone who is saying, oh, it is to liberate the people of Iran, I mean, please, just God's sake. You know what? I mean, are you a Belvist? To say something like that. So, and the point is, when you're talking about people on social media, I don't even know if those are real people anymore, man. It could be a bot, it could be an influence operation, it could be someone rage baiting, engagement farming. But the vast majority of opinions that I have seen are, in fact, the absolute opposite of the example that you present there.
Okay, so I agree with your point, but obviously I wanted to take your opinion on the people who were, against Iran. Anyway, sir, thank you so much for enlightening us. This debate has been very, very enlightening. Thank you so much. I would like to have you again on the show.
Sure.
But so far, thank you so much.
Absolutely. You take care.